Hello everybody, my name is Brandon. Welcome back to the channel. I am so glad that you're here today because I am super excited to talk to you guys about my top 10 film discoveries of 2020. So this is always one of my favorite lists that I put together every year, and I've been doing it for like 5-6 years now. It feels like a long time. So I always love doing this. And unlike 2019, where I only had like a very small amount of films to choose from because I watched such a small amount of movies overall, 2020 was a significantly better year for me in terms of watching movies. And so I know that others probably watched 2-3 times the amount of movies that I did, but for me, it was a really strong year. So it took me quite some time to whittle this list down to these 10 favorites that I'm going to talk about today. And of course, I have to include some honorable mentions, so I'll talk about those toward the end of the video, right before we talk about my number one film of 2020. So before we get into this here, I do want to talk about a couple things. First off is it doesn't matter what year these films were released. It only matters that I watched them for the very first time in 2020. So whether the film was released in 1920 or 2020, it can appear on this list if I watched it for the first time last year. And also, this is strictly my opinion. I know that you guys will probably hate some of the movies on this list, and you might love some of the others, and that's totally fine. This is just my personal favorites that I watched for the first time last year. Let me know down in the comments below what were some of your favorites. Maybe list your top 3 favorites that you watched for the first time last year, regardless of when they were actually released. I love hearing that, and maybe I'll get some good recommendations from you guys down in the comments because you guys are always recommending me some awesome things. So please let me know what your favorites were from last year down below. Before we jump into the list though, I do want to talk about some stats. So last year, I ended up just using Letterboxd to track all of my movie watching, when in years prior, I would normally have my own spreadsheet that I keep on like Google Sheets and track different things that way. But in like the middle of 2019, I lost my laptop I was using at the time, and so I lost all of my data. And so I decided, you know what, for 2020, let's just track the movies I watch via Letterboxd. It'll be easier that way, and if I lose something, it'll be okay. So that's what I decided to do, and frankly, it doesn't give quite the detail that I would like in my stats, but it's going to do for this year, or for last year, actually. For 2021, though, I am tracking them on my own spreadsheet, so at the beginning of 2022, the stats portion of this video will be significantly more enhanced than it is here, but I do have some stats from Letterboxd that I want to share with you guys, so I'm going to share my screen so that you guys can kind of look through the stats with me in case there's something I don't mention that you might be interested in, so let me show that. In 2020, I ended up watching 145 movies, which is 101 more, as you can see as I switch to 2019 here. That's 101 more movies than I watched in 2019, where I only watched 44. And in 2020, I watched 45 more movies than I did in 2018. In fact, I watched more films in 2020 than I have since 2017. As you can see, I did 192 films there. So 2020 was an excellent year for me in terms of the number of films I watched. So I'm really happy with that number. What this also means is that I logged an average of 12.1 films per month, or 2.8 films per week, which is frankly higher than I thought it was as I was going through the year. I never would have guessed that I watched over 12 films a month, but the stats don't lie, and that's what you can see there. Oddly enough, Wednesday was the day I watched the fewest number of films, while Saturday was the day I watched the most, which makes sense because I did a lot of marathons on Saturdays. Overall, October was my best month for film watching when I completed 35 films, and I did it for the first time ever. I did over 30 horror films in 30 days. So that was super awesome. I was really happy with that accomplishment because I typically never even get close. So that was really cool. I think it's at the top, but Letterboxd said that I watched 246.1 hours of film last year, which equates to 10.25 days of watching movies, which that is an awesome week and a half in my book. Looking at the genres that Letterboxd uses, I ended up watching 67 horror, 45 thrillers, 33 comedies, 28 family films, 25 adventure films, 24 sci-fi movies, 24 fantasy, 21 action, and 20 animated movies. This is interesting to me when I compare it to my books that I read last year because, I always consider myself a horror guy. But in the book world, I actually read significantly more sci-fi than I did horror, which was really surprising to me. But going back to the trusty film side of my brain, I watched a lot more horror than I watched of any other genre last year. Also interesting to me is the fact that I only watched 6 2020 releases last year, with everything else being films that were released before 2020, so older releases. A stat I'm really happy about, though, is that only 23.4% of the films I watched in 2020 were rewatches. Everything else, the other 76.6%, or 111 out of the 145 films, they were first-time viewings for me. So I had 111 options to sift through in order to make this top 10 list, which is just kind of crazy to me. Letterboxd also keeps track of everything I rated. So rating all 145 films, I gave this many films, so 3 films, 1 star, for example, 5 films, 1.5 stars, and so on. The most I gave out were 4-star ratings, which you can see I ended up giving 38 films a 4-star rating, and then 16 films ended up receiving a perfect 5 stars from me. So not a whole heck of a lot, but I do have some of those that I'm going to talk about here today. And I should mention that just because a film received a 5-star rating doesn't, 1, necessarily mean that I watched it for the first time this year, and 2, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be in this list over a 4.5-star rating film or even a 4-star rated film. It just depends on the movie itself. Letterboxd doesn't keep this exact stat, but I was able to figure it out pretty easily. So my average star rating for 2020 was 3.6 stars out of 5. The final thing here I want to show you guys is just a overview of everything that I watched in 2020. So these are just the covers of all the movies that I watched, the poster art rather. So if you are interested, you can always pause this section and look through it a little more closely, but just to give you a general idea, these are the 145 films that I consumed in 2020. Alright, so I am a huge stat nerd, so I love things like that, but if you didn't, hopefully I have timestamped the video so you could skip it if you didn't want to see it. But either way, let's not waste any more time at all. Let's dive in to my top 10 film discoveries of 2020. I'll mention right at the start here that there are only 3 on this list that I don't own a physical copy of. Number 10 happens to be one of those. I actually watched this one on Shudder. In the month of October, I had Shudder for free, and I was trying to watch, 31 horror movies, so I had to pick this one out. And this is one that I kind of heard mixed things about. Let me tell you what it is. I'm talking about 2019's Haunt, and this one is directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods. So, like I said, I've heard mixed things about this coming into it. Some people really enjoyed it. I know one of my best friends, he didn't like it at all. But because I had to Shudder, I figured I would give it a shot. And oh my gosh, I'm so glad I did. Obviously, I'm talking about it today. But this film is basically about a group of friends that are trying to find something fun to do. They're dressed up in their Halloween costumes at this party I think it was at a bar, if I remember right. But they run across this flyer that advertises this haunted house. So they decide to go check it out. When they get there, there's nobody else there, and it's just kind of like a creepy atmosphere. But they decide, it's all part of the show, so they start this haunted house tour, and things just go incredibly wrong from there. So this one has a wonderful, creepy atmosphere that is just so perfectly Halloween. I'm so glad I watched it in October because it's the perfect time to watch this movie. I thought the acting in this was just great across the board. The moments of intensity were done really well by these actors. The special effects are fantastic. There is a wonderful mix of practical effects. I'm sure there were some visual effects in there as well, but really the practical effects stood out as just being done so well. It was so fun to watch. There's a lot of creepy clowns, and their design is just amazing. Even when they get the mask off, or they're wearing clown masks. When they get the mask off, it is just even better. It is so fantastic. This is the perfect Halloween movie. I cannot recommend it enough. If you have Shudder and you haven't seen this yet, check it out. It's excellent. If you do not have Shudder and you want to own it in the physical form, previously it was only available on DVD, but it was released on Blu-ray just a few months ago. I think it may have been sometime around October. It is a little bit of a more expensive expensive release, if I remember right, and I think it has to be shipped from overseas. If you are in the States, I think you have to import it. So I have not picked it up yet, but I should, because I love the movie so much. But yes, this was such a surprise for me. I didn't expect to enjoy this one nearly as much as I did, but there are some moments that are like still in my mind, you know, even months later from watching it. So I definitely recommend this, which I'll say every single entry on this list, but Haunt was awesome. So that is number 10 on my list from 2019, Haunt. Next up on the list was another one that I watched relatively recently, and it's one that I owned from the Criterion Collection. This is Pan's Labyrinth, directed by Guillermo del Toro from 2006. So I know you guys are thinking, how have you not seen this movie yet? How did you only watch this for the first time last year? But I understand. I should have watched it much sooner, but I didn't, and I'm so glad that I finally watched it last year, because this one was so good. So there were only 3 films on this list that I gave 4.5 stars. Everything else got 5 stars. This was one that I did give 4.5. Haunt was another 4.5, and then I'll talk about the other 4.5 when we get to it. But this was just such a beautifully haunting film. So basically this is a like fairy tale horror movie that it takes place during wartime, and it is just beautiful. Like I don't know what other word to use to describe it. It is haunting. It is I wouldn't typically gravitate toward like fairy tales at all, but what they do with this one here, yes, it is a fairy tale, but it is it's just a horrific fairy tale, I guess is the best way to describe it. This is just such a competently made film. Del Toro clearly has just this incredible vision about where he's trying to go with this, and he succeeds on it in every aspect. The ending of this movie was just, it ripped me apart. Like the final line to this movie, I think I put it on Twitter when I was watching it. Like it is like, I have goosebumps right now just thinking about it. Like that final line is one of the most beautiful lines I can recall in cinema that I've seen. Like it's just perfect. It is such a wonderful finish to this film. This is a beautiful movie that you absolutely should see if you haven't, which I'm sure 90% of you watching right now have already seen this and are saying, duh, but I'm glad that I can now be a part of that conversation. So number 9 on the list from 2006 is Guillermo del Toro's Pan's Labyrinth. Number 8 on my list is another one that the waterworks happened at the end because I am a giant baby. That's just how it goes. But this is from 2018, A Quiet Place. And this was directed by John Krasinski. As you can see on the back, it also stars John Krasinski. So this one, I honestly, I had high expectations coming into it. I think this was one that was on my 5-star predictions list, and it got 5 stars. I loved it. But I didn't really know what to expect. So basically, we are in this like post-apocalyptic world where there are these giant creatures that hunt by hearing you. So if you make a noise, they will hunt you down until they kill you. It starts off with just a bang, and it's like, oh my God, what am I watching? And then it ends in just another bang. It is just so wonderful from start to finish. I was hooked. The idea, like I love post-apocalyptic movies, and this one is a good example of why. Because not necessarily because of the world, which I think the world building here is done quite well, but it's the characters. Like I grew to love these characters. In this crazy world, our main actress, played by Emily Blunt, she is a mother of, I think she has like 2 or 3 kids in this movie. She's pregnant again. And so how are you going to give birth without making noise? That's kind of like the big question of the film. So this is, I think, yeah, a masterpiece. Like, I couldn't agree more. This is such a good movie. I know this one gets a lot of love and it gets hyped up a lot, but honestly, to me, it lived up to that hype and surpassed it. I cannot wait until the sequel comes out because I will be there. Well, I will be in theaters if it's safe to be in theaters. Otherwise, I'll just wait until it comes on home video, but I cannot wait to see the sequel. It is going to be so much fun, and this is such a good movie. So, A Quiet Place is another one. 5 stars for me. Loved it. Cannot recommend it enough. So number 8 on the list is John Krasinski's A Quiet Place from 2018. Oh, I should also mention that this is one of, I think this one and the next one I actually upgraded to 4K after watching it. So I'm just showing the Blu-ray because that's the one I actually watched, but do know that I do have the 4K of these. And that one I actually have like the Mondo exclusive steelbook for it. So it's a really cool release. Number 7 is just one of the most badass films that I watched in 2020, and that is 2014's John Wick, directed by Chad Stahelski. I can never say his name properly, so hopefully that was right. But this one, of course, stars Keanu Reeves. This is a role that he is now very famous for. There are 3 movies. I think a 4th one is coming out relatively soon. But this is the start of something fantastic. I'll admit I have not yet watched Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 of this trilogy, but I will definitely be doing that in 2021, so very excited to continue this. This one I did watch on Blu-ray, but it's another one I have since upgraded to 4K, because this has some of the most beautiful cinematography, and just really it's the use of color, the use of lighting and color in this film is bar none. It is so well done, and I am such a sucker for neon lights and things like that, as you can tell from the logo of Cinefessions. That's just my thing. I love it so much, and this does that so well. The finale of this takes place during a rainstorm outside, and it is just so awesome. This is over the top. It is ridiculous, but oh my gosh, it is a 10 on the fun factor scale. This is so great. Basically with this one, we start off with John Wick's character. His wife is dead, and so he's feeling real down. But his wife gave him a gift from beyond the grave, essentially. She sent him this dog, or I can't remember exactly what happened. She told him to get a dog or whatever the case was. So he gets this little dog. Something happens to the dog, and then just crap hits the fan, and it goes from there. This is a wonderfully fun film. I cannot recommend it enough. If for some reason you've not seen this, another one, how did I wait so long to watch this? I have no idea, but now I'm a part of the conversation, and I love it so much. So John Wick from 2014 is coming in at number 7 on my list, and I cannot recommend it enough. Number 6 on my list is by far the most unexpected pick out of all 10 of these, because this is one I didn't even want to watch. Frankly, I'd never heard of it before my wife put it on, and then she put it on, and I just had no interest in watching it. Thank goodness I started paying attention, because once I did, I was hooked. So then I had to go back from the beginning and watch it from the start, because this was so funny. So I'm talking about 2020's Happiest Season, directed by Clea Duvall. So Happiest Season stars Mackenzie Davis and Kristen Stewart as this lesbian couple that is on their way home to visit Mackenzie Davis's character's family. Their family has no idea that she is a lesbian, and she wants to keep it that way as long as she can. She wants to, come out on her own terms, kind of at the end of this trip that she's going on with her girlfriend, Kristen Stewart. So these two together just are magnetic. They are so great together. Kristen Stewart, I think gets such a bad rep from her work on Twilight, which, I thought she was fine. I don't think she was the problem with Twilight. That's more just the movie itself, the script itself. But she is excellent here. She is such a standout. She is so funny. She has excellent comedic timing. Even it's more downplayed. It's more subdued than some other comedic characters in this, but she does it fantastically. I love her in this. And this is also the first time I saw Dan Levy in a movie, which I know he's very popular from Schitt's Creek, which I have yet to start, but he was probably one of my favorites in the movie. He plays a supporting role, but he is fantastic. He is such a wonderful actor, so funny. I was just dying from his performance. So all of these wonderful comedic actors together just make for a fantastic ensemble piece. There are so many more, Aubrey Plaza is in this as well, which honestly, I think she's okay. She wasn't my favorite, but she's playing more of a monotone character, so that wasn't her fault. But she has a set of twins who are just stone-faced and creepy and hilarious at the same time. So it sounds like this one is just a typical romantic comedy, but there is so much heart to this movie that I wasn't expecting. And the overall message of just having your family accept you for who you are is so wonderfully done here. Is this kind of that typical rom-com? Is it going to go in ways you would probably expect? Yeah, it probably is, but that's okay. This is a feel-good Christmas movie. We watched it right around Christmas time, and I felt really good after watching it because it was just so charming and sweet and so genuine. I loved this one so much, and it's not typically the type of movie I would seek out, but it was so much much fun. I laughed so hard during this movie. Cannot recommend it enough. And I know more than any other genre, comedy is the most divisive, because what makes me laugh might make you bored. What makes me cry might make you laugh. You know, it just depends. And so I know it's very difficult to recommend a comedy, but if it sounds like it's something that might be up your alley, I cannot recommend this enough. This one is available on Hulu, and that's how I watched it. I don't know that there is yet a physical release for this, but if there is, I definitely need to seek it out, because I want to watch this one again and again every Christmas, because it's fantastic. So happiest season from 2020 comes in at number 6 on my list. Jumping into the top 5 now, I have another film from 2020, and this one is The Invisible Man, directed by Leigh Whannell. So this stars Elizabeth Moss, and it's basically like the role of her career, at least to date. She is fantastic in this, and everyone has praised her, rightfully so, for her incredible performance here. But she stars as this a character who is in an abusive relationship, and at the start of the movie, she hatches this plan to run away from him. She does so in the middle of the night, and then she finds out relatively quickly after that her boyfriend has committed suicide. At least he's dead. I can't remember if it was suicide or not, but he's dead, whatever the case may be. She thinks, though, that it might be a hoax, because there's all these weird coincidences that keep happening around her that were kind of things that he hinted at that might happen if he were to die. So this was fascinating to watch. Like, there is one scene in particular, of course I'm not going to ruin anything, but there is one scene in particular where I just audibly gasped and was like, oh my God, what just happened? Because it's just one of those knock you on your butt scenes, and it works so well. This one is directed really well by Leigh Whannell. I think he's an excellent director. I love his work on Insidious Chapter 3. It's one of my favorites from that series. I still need to see, I think it's called Upgrade, I believe. I still need to see that one, but with the 2 I have seen, he's been excellent. This is just such a well done modern telling of the Invisible Man story. This is the horror movie of last year, and probably the film of 2020, at least from what I've seen. It was definitely my favorite of last year. So I cannot wait to see if Elizabeth Moss is up for any awards, because this was such a powerful performance by her. And it, like, from the very first scene all the way through the end, she is just so consistent and just believable and like heartbreaking throughout it. She's wonderful in this. So, this is such a good movie. I know you have probably already heard the hype about it, but believe me, the hype is real. Invisible Man is excellent. So I loved this movie, which is why it ends up on number 5 on my list, The Invisible Man from 2020. Number 4 is another one where you guys are going to wonder how in the world I waited 5 years to watch this movie, but hey, better late than never. So number 4 is Mad Max Fury Road from 2015, directed by George Miller. So I know this one was just all the rage back when it came out. Everyone was watching it, everyone was loving it, and now I finally understand why. So I know I called John Wick kind of like the most badass action movie that I watched last year, but oh man, Fury Road is probably the same. Like, it was awesome. I guess whereas in like John Wick, I was just like, at the end of it, I was ready to like go kick some butt, you know? But at the end of Mad Max Fury Road, I was just in awe of all of the action I just watched. This is basically just a long chase sequence, but done in such an artful and just, it's just such a cool movie to watch. The use of color, again, in this action film is fantastic. And this is one I watched on 4K, along with a couple, basically all of the 4K movies I watched this year would also be on like a top 4K movie list if I had one, because they all looked excellent. And I think it worked so well for this movie. Like, I think back to like some of the sequences where they were driving into like all this sand, or this, yeah, I guess it was like a sandstorm. And the color, once they get in there, is just amazing. Like, there's these greens, these oranges, these reds. It just looks so cool. I cannot recommend this one enough on 4K. And the Dolby Atmos on this was awesome as well. So this was so much fun. This is a continuation of the Mad Max story. And I'll be honest, I've only seen the original Mad Max, and then this one, I missed the 2 in between. I honestly didn't really like the original Mad Max. Well, I'm sorry, it's called The Road Warrior. The second one is Mad Max, I believe, and then it's Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, film, and then finally Mad Max Fury Road. So I will check out the other two eventually, and I do need to rewatch the original to see if I just wasn't up for it that day I watched it years ago, or what the thing is. But yeah, this one is one that I will revisit time and time again because it's just a blast to watch. So much fun. The music in this is excellent. The action sequences are just so cool. The female characters are done so well. They are so much fun to watch. They are just, they're fantastic. So I cannot wait to revisit this one again in the very near future. So number 4 on my list is Mad Max Fury Road from 2015 rather, directed by George Miller. Awesome movie that you guys already know about. So we are now in the top 3, which is always exciting. So number 3 on my list is another one from the Criterion Collection. This is Portrait of a Lady on Fire from 2019, and this is directed by Celine Sciamma. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I believe that is. So this is a French film that I actually watched on Hulu because it was available there. And then in the next Barnes & Noble Criterion sale, I finally picked it up on Blu-ray because I had to have this in my physical media collection. This is one of the most quietly beautiful films I have ever watched. Just the small moments between these characters, like, took my breath away. I got goosebumps watching them just look at each other. So Portrait of a Lady on Fire tells the story of a painter who is trying to paint a portrait of this lady who does not want her portrait painted. So she has to basically befriend her and kind of secretly get like the lines in her face memorized and everything. And then at the end of the day, she can go back to her room and paint this picture. She's hired by the woman's mother in order to paint this. And so as they become friends, something more happens with the relationship than what they were first expecting. And it is just, it is so... I don't know, beautiful, again, is just the word that keeps coming to mind. It is so charming and sweet and, again, genuine. That's what I think hits me with these movies, is if they come off as fake or anything like that, then you forget about it. You know, you might enjoy it while you're watching it, but you know, months down the line, even weeks later, you don't remember that movie. This one, I remember very specific looks that these characters gave each other because they told so much just with their faces in this movie. This is one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen, and I cannot recommend this enough if you've not seen this for whatever reason. It should still be available on Hulu if you just want to check it out that way, but there is a wonderful Blu-ray from the Criterion Collection if you would prefer to have it on the physical form, and you can see some of the special features listed there. But I cannot recommend this masterpiece enough. It is it is so well done. So such a beautiful movie that I'm so glad I watched because, again, it's not something I typically would. So very glad I took the plunge and gave this one a shot because it was definitely worth my time and is one that I will watch again and again just because of how wonderful it was made. So number 3 on my list is Portrait of a Lady on Fire from 2019. What surprised me most about this list this year is that typically I will have some older films on there, but this time around, the oldest film on my list is number 2, which came out in 2001. This is another one that's on the Criterion Collection, fortunately. This is Ghost World, directed by Terry Zwigoff. So this is based on a graphic novel, and I should mention I did check out the graphic novel from the library after I watched the movie. The movie is about 100 times better, and the graphic novel is fine. It's not bad by any stretch, but after watching this brilliant film, going to the graphic novel, the source, just wasn't quite the same because there are quite a few changes that they do to make this a little bit more accessible, I think. So Ghost World is basically a coming-of-age story. We have our two main actresses, Thora Birch and Scarlett Johansson, obviously from 2001, so they're much younger, but they are wonderful together, and they've been best friends for a while, and now they are leaving high school and entering the real world, whether that is, you know, college or getting a job, whatever the case may be. They are leaving their high school life behind, and as we all know, or if you are, I assume you're probably a little bit older if you're watching this video, but as we all know, once you leave high school, things kind of change, you know, friends separate, go their own ways, and things like that. So that's basically what these two characters are dealing with, but they meet all of these interesting folks along the way, like Steve Buscemi plays a leading role in this as well, and he does such a wonderful job. There's this kind of odd relationship that forms, it's like this odd friendship that forms between Thora Birch, who's 18 years old, and Steve Buscemi, who I think was like in his late 30s or maybe early 40s in this, but it is just such an interesting relationship to see develop throughout the film. And And just like the relationship between Scarlett Johansson and Thor Birch's character, they are fascinating to watch. And they do such a good job. They're both very understated, but that works so well. They are just super sarcastic, which reminded me of like me and my friends when we were going through high school. It just reminded me of those times. So that's probably another reason why I connected with this movie so much. But I just love this movie so much. It was one that ended, and then I wanted to just restart it again right away to watch it again, because I just felt so pulled in by these characters, this world that's created, the interesting messages that are talked about in this film. Like, it is so wonderful. It is another one. I definitely consider this a masterpiece, a more modern masterpiece. Cannot recommend it enough. If you have not seen Ghost World for whatever reason, I feel like this is kind of one of those universal movies that everyone will probably get something out of. So definitely check this one out if it sounds like it's something that you might be interested in. So Ghost World from 2001. It is the oldest film on this list, so there's a little spoiler for number 1, but this is going to be number 2 on my list this year. We are down to one more title to talk about, but before we talk about my number 1, let's talk about some honorable mentions. I'm just going to rapid fire through these as quickly as I can so that we can get on to number 1. I should also mention that these are in no particular order at all, but we have Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse from 2018, probably the coolest animated 4K movie I've ever seen. It was stunning to look at. Black Panther from 2018. This doesn't really need to be talked about. Everyone knows why Black Panther's fantastic. Aquaman from 2018, another one. The 4K disc looks stunning. The end finale is just remarkable to behold on 4K. Avengers Infinity War, oh my god, that ending. Sex, Lies, and Videotape from 1989, another Criterion Collection pickup from the sale this year. So glad I have that in my physical collection. It was just wonderful performances across the board. Oh, it's such a beautiful film. And finally, Host from 2020. This is a Shudder exclusive that was the most impressive horror film I watched all year, simply because of the way it was filmed in a pandemic. It was wonderful. The Blu-ray is coming out in a couple weeks now, so that one is already on pre-order, and it will be in the physical media collection once it's released. So those are all the honorable mentions I wanted to talk about. There are so many more. I didn't even talk about all of my 5-star films. Like, there's so many more I could mention, but I'll leave it at those 6 for now. So now let's talk about my number 1 top film discovery from 2020. Before I reveal what my number 1 film is, let me just remind everyone, this is simply my opinion. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's just my opinion. So I say that because the number 1 film on my list is arguably the most divisive film of the last few years here. Of course, I am talking about Joker from 2019, directed by Todd Phillips. This is a movie that I know I missed the original discussion on this film when it came out in 2019, but I think when the 4K was released at the beginning of 2020, that discussion was kind of picked up again, so I was able to get involved in that a little bit, just hearing what people had to say about it. And there is just so many critiques on this film, and that's fine. For me, this was a nearly perfect movie. I loved the homages that it paid to movies like Taxi Driver. I know it's been called, and I think I mentioned it in my review before I'd heard everyone else say it. I thought I was so unique, but no, I'm not. Everyone has said this. This is basically Taxi Driver for the modern day. And I definitely see where they're coming from there. This is, of course, like a Joker origin story, as everyone already knows. I love the DC film universe. I know this is not technically part of that universe, I don't believe, but it's still a DC movie, and I think it's done just wonderfully. This is, first off, the 4K disc itself, amazing. Those shots over the city are just wonders to behold on 4K. And that was when I was watching it on my old TV. I need to watch it again on my new QLED 4K TV to kind of just be blown away again. But it looks amazing on 4K. So if you love it, get the 4K disc if you don't have it. But yeah, just the performance by Joaquin Phoenix is mesmerizing as it goes on. And I just, again, just like those moments of violence that you don't expect, they always get me. Am I a sucker? Sure. Am I easy to get? Yeah, maybe. But hey, I am who I am, and I loved it. And just some moments in this have stuck with me ever since I watched this. And I watched this closer to the beginning of 2020. So they've still stuck with me even now at the beginning of 2021. There is just some images in here that will not leave me. And that is the mark of good directing in my eyes. Like the cinematography on this just looks so wonderful. Again, the city shots are beautiful. There's that shot of him coming down the stairs, which I think is just so well done. I know this is kind of like the layman's masterpiece, and that's okay. I'm a layman. I'm totally fine with that. I loved this so much, and I cannot wait to watch this one multiple times just to get more out of it. I think Todd Phillips does such a fantastic job with this movie. So I know that a lot of people are on my side, or not a side. It's not sides. We're not picking sides, but a lot of people loved it. But even more, I feel like, hated this movie. But I'm happy I loved it. I don't know. I just thought it was so well done. So this is, in my eyes, a modern masterpiece yet again, and I cannot recommend this one enough. I'm sure you've probably seen it by now, but if you haven't, and you're up for something that is very dark and touches on the social problems that some people are facing, and like a lack of access to much needed healthcare, there's a lot here that Todd Phillips is saying with this movie. And again, some people will tell you he's doing it in a very basic way. And is he? Maybe, but it worked for me, and that's all that, is going to matter in my top 10 list. So, loved this movie. Some incredible performances by Joaquin Phoenix. Robert De Niro is brilliant in this as well. This is wonderful. I'll stop gushing now because I just love this one so much. So, number 1 on my list, my favorite film discovery of 2020 has to be Joker from 2019, directed by Todd Phillips. And there they are, 7 of my top 10 favorite movies that I watched for the first time in 2020. 2020 was such a great year for watching movies for me. Everything else, sucked around the world, but at least I got to watch some great movies out of the mix. So very thrilled that you guys let me share with you what my favorites were. So now, in the comments down below, let me know what some of your favorites were that you watched for the very first time last year. You guys always give me some great recommendations, so please let me know what your favorites were down in the comments below so we can have more of a conversation. And hey, if you want to tell me where I'm wrong, please do that as well. I welcome those as well. As always, if you guys did enjoy this video, please consider subscribing to Cinefessions here on YouTube. And if not, well, thank you for watching this one. I really do appreciate that. And like I always say, I don't just talk movies, I talk all things media, be it books, movies, video games, collectibles. If it's media related, I'm interested in it. And if you are too, you might consider subscribing. All right, guys, so that's going to do it for today. I just want to say thank you all so much for watching, and I want to encourage you to consume some media today. I'll catch you next time.